welcome to the Theology Mill, brought to you by Wipf and Stock Publishers. I'm your host, Zach Mickle, and I am one of the members of the marketing team here at Wipf and Stock. On this podcast, we interview some of the leading authors in theology, biblical studies, and philosophy, many of whom are also authors with us at Wipf and Stock. If you like what you hear on the podcast, come stop by our website at wipfandstock.com. That's WIPF and stock, STOCK.com, where you can browse our books and read our blog. So on this book series spotlight, I sit down with Casey Hanson and Douglas E. Oakman, who are both series editors of Matrix, the Bible in Mediterranean Context. Casey's actually the editor-in-chief at Wipf and Stock and the author and editor of many books, including Palestine in the Time of Jesus, Social Structures and Social Conflicts. And then Doug is the emeritus professor of religion at Pacific Lutheran University and the author of several Cascade titles, including a couple in the Matrix series, Jesus and the Peasants, and then The Radical Jesus, the Bible, and the Great Transformation. So the volumes in this Matrix series explore the biblical text specifically within the social context of the ancient Mediterranean, and to that end use a variety of historical and social scientific methods to illuminate the text in said world. So with that, let's jump over to the interview. So welcome, listeners. I'm here with Drs. Casey Hanson and Douglas Oakman, who are two of the series editors for the Cascade series Matrix, the Bible in Mediterranean Context. So Dr. Doug Oakman has actually authored a couple of the books in the series, which are both wonderful. And then Casey Hanson, of course, is the editor-in-chief here at Wipf and Stock. So before we get into Matrix, and this is not the Keanu Reeves Matrix, it's much more interesting. Let's talk a bit about what we are drinking. So right now I am having a matcha tea, just plain. This is actually my first time drinking matcha not in the form of a latte. And I have to say, I was a little nervous because I think the descriptor I had heard for it before was that it's kind of grassy, which does not sound appealing at all, but I actually think it's quite tasty. It tastes like a really intense green tea kind of, so I'm enjoying it quite a bit. What are you guys sipping on?
Doug? Well, I like a strong coffee brew in the morning, which I put into basically a teapot, so I don't have to keep making coffee all the morning. That's what I have in my hand here. Strong, plain old coffee.
Very nice, very nice. Casey, how about you?
I'm drinking lemon ginger tea.
Oh, yum. Doug, I'm curious, do you drink like, is it, you said strong cup of coffee, is this like French roast we're talking about, or just highly caffeinated?
French or Italian roast.
Okay.
And Casey and I had worked together for a long time, and we always started our work off with a good strong cup of coffee.
Very nice.
I'm surprised
Yeah.
you tea today.
That's a longer story. We don't have time to go there today.
Yeah, we need to address the topics of the day.
Yeah, sure. I actually had my first Turkish coffee the other day. I don't know if you guys have had that before, but it's like, at least the kind I got was like a little 4-ounce cup. And it was, I mean, I knew it was going to be thick and bitter and all that, but I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But it was, I was feeling a little bit shaky afterwards. It was a little intense for me.
And did you drink it with a slice of lemon?
No, I was actually at a Lebanese place. So I was having, I can't remember what I ate, but I was having a heavy lunch.
Yeah, in Jerusalem, one of the best cups of coffee I ever had was in a Palestinian cafe with an espresso of Turkish coffee, and that they served with a lemon rind, and it was really good.
Okay, I'll have to try that. That sounds delicious.
I tend to appreciate espresso, but for me, Turkish coffee usually comes with sugar in it, and I prefer just strong old coffee and drink espresso or Americanos as well.
Sure,
They,
yeah.
they laugh at you in Europe, though, if you ask for an Americano.
Yeah. I think that's my favorite drink. I'll make sure not to order it when I go to Europe. Okay, let's get into Matrix. So let's just begin. If you guys could provide kind of just a brief snapshot of what you're after with the series. What is the series about for maybe listeners who haven't heard of it or don't know much about it? How would you kind of sum it up briefly?
Well, one of the key things about the background of the series is that Doug and I uh, were longtime members of the Context Group of biblical scholars working with social scientific methods. And that was a really collaborative uh, group. And it's out of that collaborative meetings, out of those collaborative meetings, that the idea sprang for a series that would specifically focus on the kind of work that we did in context, and so appealed to members of the group to contribute volumes and of various kinds um, to the series. And so in the series, you'll see we have everything from monographs like the two recent ones, Jerome Neri and writing on the Gospel of Luke, and Santiago Guijarro writing on the Gospel of Mark, are single authored, and they're a monograph with a single thesis that they're following through in the volume. And we also have books like Doug's Jesus and the Peasants, which is a collection of his revised essays on Jesus economics and peasant studies. And then we've got a book edited by John Pilch and Bruce Molina, a handbook of biblical social values, which is a collaboration of about 30 scholars writing short pieces on key values in social science perspective in biblical context. So that's Doug can say more about all of that.
Yes, and the series has both anthropological and sociological theoretical perspectives. While usually anthropology is reserved for pre-modern settings, and sociology is understood to be related to modern settings. Nevertheless, our writers and our context group people found all of those resources to be very helpful. For instance, in my case, comparative studies of peasantry could involve both contemporary peasant studies, like those of James C. Scott, or people like Eric Hobsbawm, who did historical studies of peasants. We also had people like Bruce Molina and others who used cultural anthropology to study Mediterranean values, central values like honor and shame, collectivism, dyadic personality. We have interesting perspectives from people all over the world. I think, for instance, of the book Jesus the Shaman by a South African, Peter Crawford. Casey might add some footnotes to this.
Well, yeah, and in addition to Peter Crawford's The Life of a Galilean Shaman, the book I mentioned earlier by Santiago Guijarro. Santiago is from Spain and has his own experiences of living, working, and traveling in throughout the Mediterranean that expands all of that. And the other South African in the series is Ernest von Eck on the parables of Jesus the Galilean. So it really is an international series, as well as a variety of genres of writing.
I would add, Zechariah, that most of the people who have done this kind of work had serious cross-cultural experience. For instance, Bruce Molina, former Franciscan, worked in the Philippines and garnered significant insights into a very different cultural context. With one of our writers in the series, Richard Rohrbaugh, in fact, his was the first book in the series, spent many visits to the Palestinian context, where in Arab culture, many of these values we talked about are still very much alive.
So this context group you guys are talking about, is this, I'm not familiar with that. Is that like a subgroup at SBL, or is that its own conference, or what is that?
Well, we had our own conferences, and for years they were always held in Portland, but there were a few other conferences that were outside of Portland as well. But no, it was a separate group because we also had a lot of those members formed a study and work groups both at SBL and at the Catholic Biblical Association. So that this was kind of a third meeting place where it was just doing this kind of work, employing anthropology, sociology, and social psychology.
Got it. Okay, I see.
I'd like to add, Zechariah, this was a unique seminar-like group, a working group that met for 30 plus years and is still going as far as I know. And it had a unique format of sharing papers. In fact, it may have been one of the early groups to share papers by computer means and internet means, sharing drafts that received 1 hour of a specialized critique by an appointed respondent, and then a general input from the members of the group who were present. And in this way, the seminars process was able to enhance work toward publication. And I think one of the most interesting things about the context group publication record is how voluminous it was and still is. And the Matrix series includes very good samples of end products in all of that input from those years of working together.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So you guys had mentioned kind of the international scope of the series. Would you say that kind of the methodology here would you say it's kind of been birthed out of the context of developing countries in particular?
Well,
Go ahead, Casey.
I was a little unclear about your question, Zach. That it certainly, the work is certainly influenced by the fact that many of us had cross-cultural experiences, but it also came out of three of the members had written sort of groundbreaking books that had affected all of us. And they all came out very close in time to each other, even before they had met. One of them was John H. Eliot, known as Jack, who just died recently. His book, A Home for the Homeless, which was on First Peter, was a really groundbreaking piece of work in the social scientific analysis of the New Testament. And about the same time that came out, Bruce Molina's book, The New Testament World, Insights from Cultural Anthropology, and Dick Rohrbaugh's book, The Agrarian Bible. And all of us had been really influenced by those three books, and those three guys belong to the Context Group. And all of them all three of those continued to do their own work and write numerous articles, books, and other kinds of publications that it all sort of fed together to make this critical mass of scholarship that we were all drawing upon. And we were always constantly expanding our reading in not only specifically various forms of anthropology, but also more focused in peasant studies and Mediterranean anthropology. So does that get at your question?
Yeah, it does. I think I was just curious because you guys had mentioned so much about the international scope of the series. I was just curious if there was something sort of inherent in the developing, the context of the developing world that had been a major contribution to this series and just to the methodologies you guys employ, which it seems like definitely that is the case.
Yeah.
Zach, I'll add just a few
Yeah, go for it.
comments. James Scott studied peasantry in Southeast Asia, and his work on peasants was very significant in understanding, in my opinion, understanding ancient peasantries within the biblical contexts. Somebody like on that. Anyway, yes, I would say yes because well, our focus was largely the Mediterranean world, and particularly in antiquity. Contemporary comparative social sciences were very much a part of our educational process. As I mentioned, Jim Scott, very important to all of us. Gerhard Lenski, who wrote a wonderful book called Power and Privilege, very much a part of our work. Modeling, we had, come on, help me, Casey, my mind is just blanked. On modeling was one of our key interests.
Right.
Somebody like, I'm blanking on names now. I'm sorry about that. Oh, aging brain.
Yeah, that's all right. I do it all the time, so I don't know if it's age. I do it all the time as well. Um, I guess another question is who is this series for? Because obviously you guys are talking about how it kind of emerged from um, these context conferences, and so it seems like definitely, the papers and then eventually the books were sort of produced at least from kind of an inner guild sort of setting. But who are the books for? Are you guys who do you have in mind? Is it other folks in the academy? Is it uh, pastors, interested lay people? Who did you guys have in mind?
Well, I think that the vast majority of the material in the series is sort of aimed at biblical scholars, um, but there are there are exceptions to that in the sense that, for instance, the uh, Handbook of Biblical Social Values, uh, edited by Pilch and Molina, was an effort to sort of uh, condense a lot of the work that all of us had been doing into a format that could be used with students and church groups and general readers, uh, without a lot of the technical jargon and without the scholarly apparatus sort of uh, putting general readers off. And
Sure.
so that book had originally been uh, the the first edition of that had been done with Hendrickson Publishers, and Hendrickson has gone through lots of transitions and has really scaled back in their publishing. And so when uh, Pilch and Molina wanted to put out a new edition of that, uh, we wanted that in the Matrix series because so many of the uh, authors who had contributed to that had been part of the context group and had been part of the Matrix series already. But it was, even though it was uh, aimed more at a general reading audience.
Got it. I see. Okay.
I would
So,
add one footnote, and that
mhm,
is pastors who churches where pastors are more socially conscious have valued this kind of material. I've had numerous contacts with pastors who said, this is very helpful in thinking about
mm,
how to bring these biblical materials into a thoughtful contemporary context in a church or in a synagogue and the like. So I think the work has had real meaning as well to clergy and to people in classrooms, particularly upper division or seminars, who
mhm.
have used these books with their students.
Mm. Got it. Okay. So what is social scientific interpretation? Obviously, you guys have talked about this quite a bit already, about kind of the methodology drawing from the social sciences as disciplines,
Hmm.
which there's of course a whole range of those. But how does it do that? And then what does this whole social scientific interpretation thing really look like?
Well, one of the things that uh, all of us have focused on are uh, social structures and social values. And by social structures, I mean how do uh, how do kinship systems work in other cultures, and specifically in terms of the Bible, in ancient Israel and Judah, and in Roman Palestine. How do the political systems operate? What kinds of economic structures are in place, and how is that how is that different from our own experiences? And the second thing I mentioned was values of uh, social analysis of values, like the importance of honor and shame, the role of purity concerns, uh, issues with regard to uh, what anthropologists have called limited good, meaning perceiving the world uh, in terms of everything of value being in limited quantities, whether that's tangible items like water and land and goods, or whether you're talking about values like honor, that there's a limited amount to go around. And how do you manage that? And how does that perception uh, really control a great deal of behavior? Um, how do purity concerns differ um, among the urban elite and the rural poor? Uh, because they can't, the urban elite have access and time and uh, to take care of high levels of purity concern in a way that peasants living in a village in a mud packed room do not.
Two words were really important in all of our work: anachronism, avoiding anachronism, and ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism was particularly important in saying that first century biblical cultures were quite different from 21st century U.S. American cultures. Individualism here, collectivism there. Furthermore, our groups often ask that we develop models which were to make explicit our assumptions about culture or social arrangements. And Tom Carney's book was very important to us.
The Shape of the Past?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see the difficulties in, I mean, even I think even most people picking up a Bible today probably have quite a challenging time, or just, I guess, the context, I feel like, eludes us, myself included. Um, and then you add the layer. So you add the layer of kind of that being distant from us and not being ready to hand for us. But then you also add sort of the complexity of, that this is a global collection of books, in terms of its readership today, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so each person is reading it from their own context as well, and those contexts oftentimes are distant from us as well. So I can see, matrix. I can see how these things, just how complex it can be. So what are you guys doing in this series? What are the authors doing to try to sort of sort through the complexities of navigating ancient social realities, contemporary global social realities, and then the content, the specific context that readers are coming from?
Well, what Doug was saying about models speaks heavily to that. And that is, after we do our research on what the relevant values are at stake, how the institutions are working, how their social systems fit together, making models is a way of getting the critical issues out on the table to say, this is how we see it being formed, whether we're talking about the first century and the New Testament, or whether we're talking about 7th century Judah. Uh, here's our understanding of how this operates in the society, and uh, here are some key differences with how that operates in our own society. I mean, we have debt, and we have uh, concerns about reputation and those sorts of things as well. But it operates in a very, very different arena when it's part of a different uh, society in a different time period. And so bringing those to the fore uh, is meant to help the reader get a handle on both what they're reading and how their own distinctive uh, context and awareness and depth of understanding interacts with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, two other words: understanding how people thought and acted in the past, uh, and then perhaps explanation why certain patterns persisted in agrarian civilizations, as they have been called before the Industrial Revolution. There were certain patterns that persisted. I call them variations on a theme. That is, roughly 1% controlled almost everything. And they had 10% of the population who were in their pocket, helping them to control the rest. So we often talked about the 90. My joke was always the 90% who wanted to know how the other half lived.
Yeah. And
okay,
and,
so go
and
ahead.
one
Go ahead.
also to your question, Zach, is our late friend Bruce Molina used to say, if you can pick up the Bible and just understand it immediately, just flop it open, and you say, I get that. You've probably completely misunderstood what the text is talking about.
Yeah.
Because the default position of every human being is to immediately put whatever is said or done into my own context. And so if I don't understand something that someone is telling me who comes from a different culture, whether that's in an oral conversation or whether reading an ancient text, I assume my inclination as a human being is to assume that they mean what I mean by that. And
that's ethnocentrism. That's what
right.
often we're very explicitly trying to finesse.
And so that's
sure.
what we're trying to raise up is to make explicit how the ancients who are being portrayed in the text and the ancients who are writing the text, what their assumptions are and how they're so distinctively different from our own.
In my last book, which is in the series, Radical Jesus, Bible and the Great Transformation, which the latter part, which refers to work of Carl Polanyi, great economic historian. At the end, I try to indicate how, if you really want to take these texts as authoritative for today in some manner or form, how do you do that? And I suggested that you do that with a dialogue about values. And of course, as Casey and I have been talking about, the values of the biblical periods are not the same as the post-industrial or even technological settings. So we see in our United States culture, especially in the evangelical camp, this propensity to take a verse out of context and immediately think it means something today. That's what I was trying to deal with in the book that I just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have about 4 or 5 at least more questions running through my head, but for the sake of time, we should probably wrap up. So maybe we should do maybe we can do a follow-up conversation, because I think that this could be really fruitful, and we could talk lots more. But I just want to say thank you to both of you for taking the time to chat this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Theology Mill, brought to you by Wipf and Stock Publishers. If you liked what you heard and would like to hear more, you can subscribe to our show and visit us at wipfandstock.com. But more importantly, God bless, good friends, and we hope to see you again soon.